Hi guys, welcome back, and today we're going to be talking about healing the avoidant attachment style, or fears of intimacy and connection. Where do they stem from, and how can we start to weave through this multi-layered and somewhat complicated and highly individual adaptation? First and foremost, I think it's important that we define what intimacy is. Intimacy breaks down simply into the words into, me, see, meaning that if I have intimacy with someone, I'm able to see, hear, and feel into their personal reality. This means that any relationship you have to anything could potentially and hopefully be intimate if your intention is to have close and deep connection with other people. You can have an intimate relationship with your pets, with your children, with your spouse, with your parents. All of these are different types of relationships that are going to fill different needs for you. A lot of people tend to think that intimacy means sex, and sex is really only just a small part of intimacy, but it's definitely a part of intimacy. So now that we've defined that, we need to dive into some of the deeper things. So this video is for those of you out there who are wanting a deep connection with somebody, but your behaviors and thoughts and actions and past traumas continue to line you up with situations that don't put you in a position to be deeply connected to other people. So we're going to explore why that is and what to do about it. Now, what if you're somebody who fears intimacy and closeness but doesn't want a close relationship with somebody or isn't interested in that? Then I'll ask that you ask yourself the same questions along the way and still watch this video. It might still be useful to you. Because in reality, we all need closeness to some degree, even if we're not after, say one particular kind of intimate relationship. The topic of relationships is huge because life is literally just a series of relationships. You are in relationship to everything and anything in this universe. When we become deeply consciously connected to one another and everything in this universe, we have the chance to see truths about ourselves and the universe that we've never known before. So then here's the thing. If we have to be connected in order to understand, and we have to understand in order to take the best interest of whatever it is that we're connected to in this world as part of our own best interest, then it certainly behooves us to try to figure out how it is that we can have close and connected relationships and why we're so terrified of them. Many of us are dying to have a close relationship, yet are anxiously avoiding them at the same time. Having thoughts like, maybe I'll end up alone. I just know what I want. Maybe I'm too picky. What if they leave me? We swirl around in our thoughts, vacillating between being hopeful that somebody will truly love us for who we are and really thinking that it's not possible at all because all the evidence in our life has shown us that that's not even possible. And then, if we do enter into relationships, they're extremely difficult, which then only reaffirms what we already thought and believed about relationships. So what we're seeing is a split between the part of me that wants to be alone, doesn't want to fuck it up. I don't want to fuck it up. I don't want somebody else to fuck it up. I'm actually doing okay. Not really, but okay, this is the part of me, right? And then the other part's like, I'm dying to have a close relationship. I'm so incredibly lonely. I feel so incredibly separated. So how did we come to be alone? How did we come to develop and then recognize the part in us that doesn't want a relationship? And how did we come to fear the very thing that we need to survive? How did we become avoidant? So, there are several answers to these questions. First, I want you to examine your thoughts and beliefs around intimacy and connection. A belief is simply a thought that has been thought enough times to where you have physically manifested the proof or evidence that supports your thinking. This is when something becomes a belief. If beliefs are simply adopted, then that means that we have the option to change our thinking and beliefs and thus manifestations consciously. There are many ways to change a belief. Byron Katie has a process called the work, which is really confusing, honestly. It really makes sense to some people. I'm still trying to figure it out. And then Teal obviously has a video titled How to Change Belief. All of these processes are designed to help you replace an old belief that no longer serves you with a belief that does serve you. Cognitive reframing, which is what this is a tool, and it's a tool that should be used carefully. Like anything, a tool can be used both as a justification to hurt yourself or to help yourself. So we can certainly reframe things in ways that are negative or harmful to us, or we can reframe them in ways that will be positive or beneficial to us. Keep in mind that a lot of us aren't even aware of the beliefs that we have because they became so automatic at such an early age. If a belief becomes automatic, then we don't think about it anymore. We're just behaving and taking action from that space unconsciously. We make choices and see life through the lens of these beliefs, and it becomes the foundation from which we create in our lives. A really important step is to notice somatically, physically in your body, what happens, what emotions start coming up, what feeling sensations come up, just when you think about having an intimate or close relationship. We want to use unconditional presence as a way to sort of allow our being to open up and show us the truth of what's hiding underneath these anxieties for us. We can use parts work or the completion process or many other modalities to be unconditionally present with our emotions so that they can open up and we can see the internal world and thus consciously meet their needs. So doing this is slowly going to kind of give you a better understanding of what your own personal traumas are around connection, because sometimes we might have things that we don't even know of or that we're not even aware of. I want to talk to you about the two main kinds of trauma that we see causing fear of intimacy or closeness. And now, of course, the unique ways that you were abused in childhood, gaslit in your own special ways, that's going to be unique to you. But for the sake of this, we're going to separate these out into ingoing and outgoing boundary violations. That's what we're going to call this. An incoming trauma from somebody would be something like enmeshment trauma, where your beliefs, wishes, wants, desires are not taken into consideration. Maybe you're treated more like a pet or a doll, or like a little mini-me. Smothering or hyper-controlling, sexual assault, physical or emotional abuse in any capacity. These are all incoming things. You can see how the energy is like this. An outgoing trauma would be something like abandonment, the hugs that were not given, the emotional support that was not given, sort of the lack, and you're going to feel that energy, which is a pull away. This fear of rejection from direct experiences with other people where we felt shamed or criticized is now the physical proof or evidence that we have that continues to support the beliefs that we've decided on subconsciously, which may be something like, nobody is going to love me once they know who I am, or relationships don't last. Fill in the blank. This person will protect themselves by not allowing themselves to get too close to other people and not allowing other people to get too close to them. If this was your trauma, you may feel terrified that when you enter into a relationship with someone, you might become your worst self. Because of relationship patterns that you've had in the past, you think that those same patterns are going to continue to play out. Why wouldn't you think that? And that's a totally valid fear to have if you're somebody with this coping mechanism or this style of attachment, because you were not received in childhood. This part of you is so desperate to have connection that it has convinced itself that not only does it not currently have it, but it can't have it or shouldn't because of what negative experiences you are projecting into the unknown of any future relationship based on the evidence you have from the past. But we can't be a match to new proof if we're convinced that it doesn't exist. It's sort of like looking around at exactly where you are and where you've been with no vision of what could be. So whatever we have now in our reality is just a direct reflection of our old adopted beliefs and thoughts, which tie us to a current narrative that we tell ourselves about what relationships are. But we have the capacity to change those beliefs, those thoughts, that story, and that narrative consciously, together. If you understand how the law of mirroring works, you know that you will continue to line up with experiences and people who mirror the parts of yourselves that you are unaware of. Meaning in this case, if you're the avoidant, you may line up with partners who are also avoidant and who mirror the exact wound that you have by leaving you feeling constantly triggered or abandoned. So if you're not lining up with people who are also avoidant, which is triggering your actual wound of being abandoned and feeling rejected, then you're going to be lining up with people who are mirroring the anxious side, whether that's suppressed in you or not. Another thing to mention is that because of fragmentation, because we have multiple aspects, you could potentially have different aspects with different coping mechanisms, which is why we see this anxious-avoidant or these seemingly opposite coping mechanisms coexisting, because you have different parts of you that have coped with your reality differently. Which is why I think it's better that instead of trying to nail yourself down to a specific attachment style, just notice, what are my unresolved traumas around connection? How do I feel in regards to being close to other people? What type of partners have I been attracted to in the past? What are my responses to people who are clingy, and what are my responses to people who are avoidant? Because this will already tell you what you need to know. Because whatever our judgments are about those things will tell us a lot about how that is actually playing out in us. So to the opposite end of that, we may fear closeness because we've learned that closeness means loss of freedom. We need to see that this pushing is a coping mechanism designed to help keep us safe and in control. You learned, of course, that being in relationships meant losing your own autonomy. Why would you want that? If this is you, then you need to think about how it is that connection or commitment could actually mean more freedom than you can imagine. When I say that, you're probably thinking, if I commit, then I'm not free to do as I choose. So how is that free? In fact, the thought of that makes me feel panicky. You learned that freedom meant a loss of personal choice and a loss of personal free will. But what if I told you that it wasn't possible for you not to commit to something, and that by not committing, you're actually committing to not committing? What if I also told you that now, as an adult, you actually have the conscious free will and the choice to choose into a connection with somebody and to choose out of that? Which means that you are in control by committing. In fact, it's you exercising your personal freedom and free will to choose into that consciously. It's true that in childhood you didn't have control, and you basically had to commit to people who insecurely attached to you, but you don't have to do that anymore. This subconsciously taught you that this is what it means to be loved. This is not what it means to be loved. To be loved is for somebody else to take your best interest as a part of their best interest, which means that they are seeing, hearing, and feeling into your personal reality. And because that didn't happen, that doesn't mean that it can't happen. Those who identify as having a fear of intimacy have been wounded by relationship dysfunctionality in some capacity. We can see that by avoiding or keeping ourselves from intimate relationships, we can avoid all of the suppressed trauma being with another person that deeply would cause to surface. So, what is it that attracts us to people? Our insatiable attraction to people actually, unfortunately, sorry to burst your bubble, comes from our own internal polarity. So the reason that we have this attraction is because we're basically acting like giant magnets. So if you think about it this way, whatever you are consciously identified with, let's say I identify as being a very strong person. This is basically the frequency that I'm going to operate at, but that doesn't mean that I don't also contain my suppressed self, which is, let's say, a very vulnerable aspect. I'm going to be magnetically pulled to people outside of me and attracted to people who basically mirror my suppressed self in a way. And it's going to cause me to have all kinds of interesting reactions to all the different things that that person does. This is basically what relationships are, where you're extremely attracted to that person, you just can't stay away. So because we often enter into those kinds of relationships unconsciously, we're confused when the attraction that we felt towards this person fades, and what we're left with is the reality of them and the reality of how we've treated what they represent in us. Another example, if I have repressed my anger because I've decided that's not okay, I may continue to line up with angry partners, but that may not be what I see at first in that person. It's only until that intense magnetic attraction fades that I'm actually able to see the truth of that person, which is, in a sense, seeing the actual truth of myself. The point of me explaining this is to show you why it is that your proof for relationships being scary is not wrong, it's valid, but also why you have the capacity now to change that. Given that many of us have no functional model of actually how to have a successful relationship, there's a natural fear that what happened before will happen again. And the truth is that if we don't validate our truth, our feelings, investigate our beliefs and thoughts, and consciously choose to integrate those experiences and thus change and grow from them, then we will line up with those experiences again. But that's okay too. I want you to ask yourself these questions seriously.
What standard do I hold myself to in regard to relationships? We're socialized to believe that the perfect soulmate exists who will make us feel complete. We're sold a story, but we're never actually given a practical formula for how to sustain long-term connection within relationships. Are these beliefs helpful to us and our relationships, or hurtful? What does a successful relationship mean to me? Have I internalized my failed relationships to mean that there is something wrong with me? What have I been told a successful relationship is? If I am being honest with myself, where am I at in my healing journey in regards to relationships? What do I need? Have I made having this need met not okay? Stripping down and writing down as many of your thoughts and beliefs around this topic will help you to see which things no longer resonate with you. If you have a belief about something, it means that you have evidence supporting your belief. If changing the meaning that you give the evidence supporting your belief means that you can adopt a belief that benefits you instead of harms you, then this is exactly what I'm going to encourage you to do. It's important, though, that we never use changing a belief as a way to trick ourselves out of being in pain. We need to be unconditionally present with our pain and our experiences to understand the deepest needs and personal truths that we have first. Then we can consciously choose to adapt, when it feels good to us, beliefs that better serve us. So like we talked about before, if you have a belief, then that means you have evidence supporting that belief. So how can we change the meaning that we've given to the evidence that's supporting our belief? If we think of it sort of like a tabletop, the top of the table is the belief, the legs are the evidence supporting that belief, and the glue is the meaning that we've given that evidence. When we change the meaning, the glue starts to loosen, and the evidence that we have can no longer support the belief.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. If I have a belief, and by the way, this requires an immense amount of honesty, that I'm not good enough to be loved, and my evidence for that is that Dad left me when I was 5. Remember, beliefs can be conscious and subconscious. Most of them are subconsciously adopted from experiences and then the meaning that we extracted from those experiences. After being with and meeting the needs of our pain, we have the option to decide what we want that experience to mean. What did it mean to us back then? How can we fit this into the framework of our life now in a way that feels good? So within the example of the 5-year-old that internalizes that I'm not good enough because Dad leaves, after being unconditionally with that part, we can go back and assign new meaning to that experience. That new meaning may look something like this. I gave rise to the most powerful desire for connection within the universe by experiencing deep disconnection. He must have been living in his own personal hell. Maybe he felt extremely isolated himself. Normally, I have veered away from things like cognitive reframing because I think it's so important that people understand that there are parts of us that are not emotionally developed and then they're not logical at all. So this is an organic process. Do not force yourself to do this. It's extremely beneficial though, and it's a crucial part of actually being able to now create a new reality based on new beliefs that you've consciously adopted. I also want you to know that if you're watching this and you're somebody who is struggling with closeness or has anxiety around it or intimacy or whatever, you're not alone. We're literally bridging this gap right now. We are in the emotional dark ages. We are so incredibly disconnected from one another. Your desire for something different based on new beliefs is what's going to be the thing that hopefully reconnects humanity over a long period of time. This is the kind of updating in consciousness that we're doing. So don't feel like this is something that you alone are struggling with. Like, it makes sense. And this is something that we're all going to have to do together to start to create a world where we can consciously connect and actually be seen, felt, and heard, and really what that means and what that world can look like. You're going to be the one that's doing that if you're doing this work internally with yourself. You're going to be the one that's teaching people how to love, what it means to connect, because you're going to be teaching that to yourself. Collective healing is only possible when more people like yourself come forward with their fears to teach themselves curiously how to love for the first time with our own conscious model, personally crafted from the experiences of what we don't want, thus giving rise to what we would prefer instead. Other things to consider around why I would have anxiety around people or intimacy/connection. Number 1, or a dozen. I don't even know where we're at in this video. You're being inauthentic. Meaning, I feel like I need to be alone because when I'm alone, at least I can be authentic and I can express potentially any of my possibilities. Whereas I feel like maybe I'm not even able to be myself with a lot of people. Part of the reason why we do that is because we've convinced ourselves along the way that we have to do that. Because that's what socialization means. If you don't do that, you fucking socially die. Notice the difference between somebody you feel like you can be yourself around and somebody you don't feel like you can be yourself around. Obviously, you're going to have more anxiety around somebody that you feel like you can't be completely authentic with. You start to look at the ways in which you are being inauthentic with people and how that is actually pushing you away from connection, because who the fuck wants to be inauthentic? The other thing is trust your gut. Sometimes if we're just anxious around people, it's because maybe we just don't want to be around that person, and that's okay too.
We need to listen to our body and know which connections feel good for us and which connections don't feel good for us. At some point, we will all have to realize that all of our relationships matter. The relationship that we have with everything, every plant, and every animal will mean the difference between our extended survival or our death. Thank you guys so much for caring and giving a fuck. Have a great day.